Before 2010, the World Cup had never belonged to Africa. And I don't just mean in terms of who lifted the trophy. I mean, the continent had never been trusted to hold it. 80 years of football's greatest tournament, and Africa was always watching from the sideline. But that was about to change. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one strike to rewrite history. Let's go back to the beginning. The FIFA World Cup started in 1930 in Uruguay, under the vision of FIFA's first president, Jules Rimet. From that inaugural tournament onwards, the competition bounced between Europe and South America. Countries like Italy, France, Brazil, and Argentina becoming household names as World Cup hosts. Mexico hosted twice in 1970 and 1986, becoming the first non-European and non-South American nation to hold the tournament twice. But even then, the pattern was always clear. The World Cup belonged to the established superpowers. For 50 years, from 1930 all the way to 1980, not a single African nation had even come close to hosting the competition. The infrastructure wasn't there, people said. The facilities weren't good enough. Africa wasn't ready. These weren't just obstacles, they were excuses, whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. The football world had decided where the World Cup belonged, and Africa simply wasn't on that list. Then, in 2002, something shifted. South Korea and Japan became the first Asian nations to co-host the tournament, and suddenly, the conversation changed. If Asia could do it, then why not Africa? The question hung in the air, demanding an answer. But the real turning point came in August 2000, when FIFA President Sepp Blatter and the Executive Committee introduced the Continental Rotational Policy. It was a bold decision designed to ensure that every confederation across the globe would eventually get their opportunity to host football's greatest spectacle. But this policy didn't come from some altruistic impulse. It came from frustration. It came from a vote that nearly broke the entire system. See, in 2000, South Africa had bid to host the 2006 World Cup. They had prepared their proposal meticulously. They had the stadiums, they had the vision, they had the passion. And on voting day on July 6th in Zurich, it came down to the wire. See, it was Germany versus South Africa, and the votes were counted, and South Africa lost. 12 votes for Germany to the 11 of South Africa. They lost by one single vote. That's all that separated Africa from its moment. And to make it worse, that loss was only possible because Executive Committee member Charles Dempsey abstained from the vote at the last minute. See, Dempsey, who was instructed to vote for South Africa, abstained due to, quote, intolerable pressure and inappropriate lobbying, including threats, defying his delegation's instructions. A decision that still raises eyebrows to this day. See, that narrow defeat stung, but it also lit a fire under the belly. The rotation policy was essentially FIFA's way of saying, never again. Never again will Africa be locked out. Never again would one vote determine a whole continent's fate. So in October 2002, the bidding process for the 2010 World Cup opened. And this time, all 52 African member nations were eligible. Egypt threw their hat in, the likes of Tunisia, Ghana, Nigeria, they also made bids. See, the African nations were hungry. They turned up. But when the votes came in on the 15th of May 2004 in Zurich, it was South Africa who emerged victorious. They defeated Morocco 14 votes to 10. Africa was getting its World Cup. It only took 80 years, but we're here now, and I guess that's what matters. But this story wasn't plain sailing. Not even close. Because winning the vote is one thing, actually pulling it off is another. See, to host an event on this scale, where the entire world descends on your country for a month, you need some serious infrastructure. World-class training facilities, proper accommodation for players, quality stadiums, hotels and transport. The full package. South Africa had ticked those boxes on paper. That's why they won the bid. But paper and reality are two very different things. The biggest concern heading into the 2010 South African World Cup was crime. The South African Police Service crime report for 2010-2011 recorded approximately 2.1 million registered cases of serious crime in the South African region. So you're telling the whole world to come visit your country for this spectacle, and at the same time your streets have a reputation for being genuinely unsafe. One British tabloid even went as far as interviewing gang leaders in Cape Town who predicted that armed gangs would, and I quote, swoop down on helpless tourists like hyenas at a school picnic. In response, however, South Africa deployed over 40,000 police officers to secure the tournament. But the question on everyone's lips was, would that be enough? See, as it turns out, all the noise didn't matter because, ready or not, the World Cup was in Africa. It's Friday, the 11th of June 2010, and all eyes are on the Soccer City Stadium in Johannesburg. Years of preparation, political decisions, backlash, and criticism. All of it leading up to this moment. And the question the whole world was asking was, Africa, can you deliver? Well, the answer came in the 55th minute of the opening game, South Africa versus Mexico. 0-0 up until that point, but a neat 1-2 combination, and then Kigashi Digakoi plays a beautifully weighted pass, and then there's Siphiwe Tshabalala. He takes one touch, opens up his body, and unleashes a ferocious left-footed strike that flies past Mexican goalkeeper Oscar Perez. The stadium erupts. And English commentator Peter Drury delivers one of the most iconic lines in football commentary history. Go for Bafana Bafana. Go for South Africa. Go for all of Africa. The vuvuzelas were deafening in this moment, and Tshabalala and his teammates sprint to the corner flag and break into the now legendary Diski Dance. And just like that, history was made. The first ever World Cup goal scored on African soil. FIFA President Sepp Blatter said it best when he told BBC Radio 5 Live. He said, "It was a World Cup in a new continent with a new culture, and therefore it must be analysed on different levels." If you look at the enthusiasm from South Africa and the audiences around the world, it was a special World Cup. And he was absolutely right. South Africa 2010 is arguably the most iconic edition of the tournament till date. From Shakira's Waka Waka, "This is the time for Africa," which now sits at 4.4 billion views on YouTube at the time of recording, to the piercing sounds of the vuvuzelas, the instrument that drove one half of the world mad and the other half of the world absolutely wild, to the unpredictable bounce of the Jabulani ball that had goalkeepers like Iker Casillas and Edwin van der Sar pulling their hairs out. This tournament has its own identity, its own culture, and its own place in football history. 80 years after the first World Cup, the continent of Africa finally stepped into the forefront of the global stage. And it didn't just meet expectations, it exceeded them. Roughly 300,000 foreign visitors returned home safely and impressed. Despite every pessimistic prediction leading up to the tournament beforehand, it was considered a huge success. Because at the end of the day, right, the World Cup belonging to Africa was never really about an African nation lifting the trophy. It was bigger than that. It was about Africa showing the world who it really is. The passion, the culture, the resilience, and leaving a mark that the football world would never forget. Africa didn't just host a World Cup. Africa changed what the World Cup could be. Now, fast forward 16 years. We're in 2026 and something remarkable is happening again. See, the World Cup is returning to North America. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are sharing the honor of hosting this prestigious tournament. But there is a poetic symmetry here that's just impossible for me to ignore. On the opening day of the 2026 tournament, the very first match will be South Africa versus Mexico. The exact same pairing, the exact same nations that gave us Siphiwe Tshabalala's thunderbolt in that Soccer City Stadium all those years ago. 16 years on, the question we're asking is, can we replicate that same magic? Can the opening day produce another moment that reminds the world why we fell in love with this beautiful game? And then there's the elephant in the room, the United States. As hosts, they've got the weight of expectations on their shoulders. The tournament is on their soil. The world will be watching. Can they live up to the hype? Can they deliver a tournament worthy of the legacy that South Africa set in 2010? Because that's what 2010 did. It set a standard. It proved that the World Cup could be more than just football. It could be culture, it could be history, it could be a moment where an entire continent steps into the spotlight and says, we belong here too. So as we head towards 2026, we're not just watching a football tournament, we're watching to see if lightning can strike twice. My name is Olise, guys, and if you guys want to see more of these videos, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys during the World Cup. Goodbye.